I am here with the one and only CMO and co-founder of Uberflip, Randy Frisch, and we are going to talk about stream on, right, Randy?
Absolutely. That's the name of the game these days.
That is the name of the game.
Well, it's funny. I always use these analogies like Netflix, but now in the world that we're all living in, which is completely messed up, the reality is that analogy is often like 3 feet away from where we're working, right? Because like many of us are like sitting here and then we jump over to the right to go like sit on our couch and watch what we're ever going to watch. And it just feels personalized. And then we jump back to our computer and maybe sometimes if Sixth Sense is sending me a message, it feels personalized, but very often not the case.
So are you saying that the message of stream on is more important now than ever?
I'd say that we're kind of living in this digital vacuum right now is a term that I've used since early March. And in this vacuum, we only have digital channels. Like think about it. We've lost so many of the channels that as marketers, we're so used to using, things like events, things like direct mail. I know they still have a place, but not in the same way that we used to leverage them so heavily. And what that's done is it's said, okay, well, we got
office visit. I mean, the sales team visiting folks.
Yeah, the sales. I mean, like, forget about wanting to go visit. You're just not welcome, right? even if there's a part of the world that is opened up, corporations for the most part are playing it very safe for good reason. And, when you think about that, in one case, as a marketer, it's overwhelming. Like I'm overwhelmed, I'm not going to lie. I feel like this sense of loss of control. But on the other side, I remind myself, like, we still have all these digital channels. They're just now more important than ever. And back to the point on streaming, in a digital world, that's where we expect to run into the same experiences that we see on Netflix. We just talked about, to me, I love Spotify. Like, it's probably streaming in 3 places in my house right now. And all these different solutions like Amazon too, they give us what we want when we want it. And then we tune into an email that feels completely out of context to understanding who I am, what I care about, what stage of the buyer journey I'm in, if we think more about B2B specifically. But this is the case, B2C, B2B, as consumers, we buy and we expect you to know who we are.
What I hope is a final wake-up call for B2B marketers about putting the buying journey at the center of the universe, not our technology and our ability to automate.
I like that. A thing that I say that's somewhat similar to this is we all think about just running to leverage tech, but one of the best triangles we always see is that people, process, and technology triangle, right? It's such a sound framework to think through how we approach our day-to-day. And I always say, though, that the key is to realize that tech is the last thing you put in place. The first to me is people. Like, people is what wins or loses in business. Like good people help you win. And then you need a good process to build upon. And in the case of what you're talking about, it's thinking about that buyer journey. And then when we want to scale it, that's when we have to start to think about tech. Right, that's where tech can start to help us. And it's interesting. You even think about ABM as a buzzword or term, or how we've all adopted to it. Like those who I've seen be most successful with it, they essentially start with a very small number of accounts, which is in ways the proper definition of ABM. Like we're going to really just target 5 to 10 accounts. You talk to some analysts, they'll say that's real ABM. But the reality is, I think where we're going longer term, and some of us are already there, is the expectation is to find ways to deliver that same personalization at scale. We have to, right?
I think you have to. And I guess what I've seen, and this has been my own experience with ABM, is if you focus on a small group of not well-selected accounts, and it's more about the tactic of direct mail and the campaign and less about understanding what's bespoke about these accounts, what do they care about, what are the insights that we need to be able to glean, like, it doesn't matter. You're still just being annoying. They're not in market for what you do. So they don't need another mug.
Sure. I mean, we always need another mug. Come on.
That's true. That's true.
This is my hockey mug. I'm very Canadian. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think the point here is we all have to evolve, and we have to continue to evolve. You know, and the expectations at scale are that of what, you know, we would do to a one-on-one experience. I think for us to suggest that we can get away with a one-to-one approach for this small handful, but not put any personalization to the others, it's just not going to cut it anymore. And that's, you know, the bar is always changing. Like, think about it this way. This is the example I sometimes laugh at, which is, you know, if you go back, 10 years ago, and if any of us got an email from a big company like an Apple, or maybe it was Blockbuster back then, whoever was emailing us.
Blockbuster.
Yeah. You know, they would start off that email and they'd be like, "Hey, Randy." And I'd be like, "Holy shit, how do they know my name? That is so cool. Like, how does this massive company know my name?" Right? 10 years later, present, when I get that email from that company, I'm like, fuck, how did I get on their list?
Oh, I know. You're like, I'm screwed. I'm going to have to go bankrupt on email again.
What is cool 10 years ago is not cool today. It's kind of, it's staples, it's basic. What we want to do now is we want to get to that next level. So think about today, like, it's no longer Blockbuster, it's Netflix. And I don't know about you, but when I get that email from Netflix, I think I get it at least once a week. It's like, "We've got something for you to watch tonight, Randy." But what makes me open up that email is that I know that the content that's in there is going to be stuff that I'm going to want to watch. And that's the expectation I think that we have to get to as marketers, is to realize, you know, just throwing in your persona name, you know, you're a demand marketer, or you're this type of buyer, depending on who's listening to this and who their customers are. That's not enough. That's just the basic. Great, you've got their attention, but show them that you can do something with that knowledge.
How is Uberflip stepping up to this challenge?
Well, by high-fiving with 6 cents, right? So there you go.
True.
So when you think about Uberflip, in terms of what our platform does, before you get to all the fun, sexy stuff of personalizing, you do some less sexy stuff, which is tagging content, organizing content. Like,
I know about tagging.
Yeah, it is not sexy stuff. But like, if you do that, you're setting yourself up for such scale and such opportunity. So now what I can do is I can say, okay, I've tagged this content accordingly. And if I'm using a data source like 6 cents, I can start to map to say, okay, the person has these interests. We have content that map those interests. Let's serve that to them. And that's our ability to start to say, okay, we're not just going to say, "Hey, we know your name," but rather, we know your name, we know your industry. We're going to map those into an understanding of the content that you want, depending on the stage of the buyer journey you may be at.
We tagged our content to the intent keywords, and we did that a while ago. And of course, we've got the stage-based predictions, so we know if you're early or late stage. So that's kind of what we've been testing out and proving out. And so now our personalizer, we have one hub. And like, I don't need to create, you know, if you think about an ABM one-to-one journey where it's like, okay, I got to go create a hub for like 100 accounts, 100 hubs.
Absolutely.
I have one.
But it's interesting. I mean, we started this company in 2012. And I remember in 2013, once we actually had stuff off the ground, the idea of segmenting and personalizing content was like, we couldn't sell that to anyone. They were just like, no, we just put all our content in our resource center and people will find what they look for. We'll organize it under these different headings.
Because everyone's going to your B2B content hub and like.
So they were, you know, and then I remember this is really cool. There was a company called LivePerson. They were one of our first companies in 2013, and they actually created event-specific hubs. And we couldn't believe it that like there was all these variations. You know, you fast forward, I won't take you through the different customers and the years, but it's been an evolution of getting to where we are now, and how marketers are thinking so much more about the individual. So now the idea of an event hub is like, obviously I'll do that. But it's more, what do I start to do to create a stream for every account? Now, what we see companies do, I would say most often, is they'll really handpick still for, back to those 5-10 accounts that we know we're going to target and we're going to go heavy on. And they'll still use some AI, some of the apps we have like 6sense, but more so, what they're trying to do as well is go after that one to few or that one to many with the same type of principles that we learned so much about in that one-to-one mindset.
Yeah, what we've found on our stream on journey, which has been lively to say the least, is we can actually understand the persona and the buying stage and the keywords, and then we write to the keywords. So rather than build a persona map by going around and interviewing and somewhat guessing, it sort of lives and breathes, and then every quarter we can see, okay, this is what these buyers care about. So the bingo card kind of resets every quarter based on the most relevant topics.
Is that on the content person, or is that more like a demand person on your team? Like it's a big tricky question right now of like, who's
our content person.
Interesting.
And and we have an SLA with sales and our BDRs that we want every quarter the top 4 to 5 keywords covered.
Very cool.
Tell us about this partnership or the marketplace that you've got rocking.
So we built a marketplace so that companies like 6sense and others can go and build apps. They're going to complement our platform. So the 6sense one we unpacked earlier, Latané, which is going to allow someone to match those intent signals and deliver the right content on the fly for every account. Also do things like we have an app with Clearbit that allows us to throw in the logo of the company on the fly through that data that we're getting from 6sense as well. So everything starts to interconnect. We can also trigger a chatbot through something like Drift to pop up and continue to leverage some of that intent data. So it's, the reality for a marketer is these are all the things that we're struggling with to piece together. And a marketplace is designed to make it faster to get up and running and open up new doors that may not even be on our product roadmap for the next 12 months, but maybe a top priority to one of our customers or one of our partners, to go and build on their own.
Who's crushing it? Whose hubs are the best of the best?
Oh,
I want to go learn.
That's a good question. Let's look at this from the lens of COVID. We had companies who use our platform like Medtronic, who's in the healthcare space. They make ventilators for those who are familiar.
Well, so they're doing okay.
Yeah. So, demand is not an issue, but very interesting is they have this field sales team that would go into hospitals to help clinicians use the ventilators that are purchased. And they lost the ability to go into the hospital. So they had to turn to a digital channel and start to create content more around guiding customers and helping educate them the best ways to use the products. And the coolest one, I think, is 3M. So 3M is a customer of ours. As we all know, they make masks. And what they were able to do is they were able to spin up destinations for companies, for their customers. Again, it wasn't an issue of demand, but people need to understand how to use their products. So like one example they gave to me is like, everyone's growing a beard now, like beards are in. They're like, how do you wear a mask with a beard? Right? Like that's a big question. They have to educate around that. They need to make sure that they're
maybe they should partner with Dollar Shave Club.
Exactly.
So, that should be in their marketplace.
But all these companies, they're doing the things that we talked about earlier. They're using, a lot of the ideas that we talked about in terms of what do they stream, what are people going to look for? As Jesse, who works at 3M, told me, he's like, we didn't go and create all this content. We just had it tagged properly so that once we realize this is the priority, we can prioritize that content.
All right. Awesome. Well, that's like our first part of the show. The second part of the show I've been really looking forward to because I've picked out some really good topics for you for talking nonsense.
Nice. Bring it on.
So talking nonsense, we're going to do 6-ish topics, about a minute each, no more.
Okay.
And I'm just going to throw them at you and we'll see what we can kind of get through here.
Bring it on.
The first topic is your hair. There's a lot. Like, how does this happen?
Yeah, I'm being safe right now.
Let it go. That's what I like.
Yeah, I'm trying to be safe right now. And that means no haircuts. Like in Toronto, there are no salons open still. I was probably due for a haircut when this whole thing kicked off. And it just gets to a point where it's just there. And, you got to work with what you got.
So would you say this is like a 2-foot circumference now? Maybe a foot and a half?
on the weekend, like I usually do a workout in the morning, a little later in the morning though, so I won't shower in the morning. If I'm jumping on a call on the weekend, people are like, what is going on? After a night's sleep, it's a little wilder.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right. Next topic, talking Canadian.
All right. What do you want to talk about?
I want, we got process.
How many have I dropped that you're just like, who is this guy? See, I speak to Americans all day long, so I don't even hear the American version because I speak Canadian, I guess, but I hear both as equal. About 80% of our business is in the US, and as much as I love our Canadian customers, you gotta tweak to the masses.
All right, this is one of my favorite topics: gate or no gate.
Ooh, I
have strong opinions.
I hate the word "it depends," but I think
no, that's such a cop.
But I'm going to tell you what it depends on more specifically. It depends on the time and when we're dealing with this. Right now, people don't want to fill out CTAs. They are in learn mode. If they're not in purchase mode, they are thinking to the future.
You think before they wanted to? They were like,
they were more willing to. I think we've got to realize it's time to adapt. I'm not anti-gate. I think there's a time for a gate, but then there's also time where we can learn a lot of what we're trying to gate through partners like 6 Sense, through other ways that we can fulfill that data at the right time when we get someone on the call. What I don't like is long forms. To me, the most information you should be asking someone about at one step is maybe 2 or 3 pieces of information. All
right. Fuck content marketing.
Yeah. How'd that come to be? So I wrote that as a blog post. And you
just kept going?
No, it's funny. Usually, this is in a time where we would still jump on planes and when we didn't have Wi-Fi on planes. And I would jump on there and I'd have no connectivity. I'd pump out a blog post. I'd send it to my team. They'd be like, nice, one less post for us to write this week. And I sent that one and they're like, no way I'm posting that. We're going to offend everyone. And it took me a few weeks to even get them to look at it, and a couple of months until they were ready to go live with it. And it's realizing that I'm not saying as an example that I don't love content marketers. I think they're extremely talented. It's a really hard skill. My point of the F-bomb there is let's not even bother with content marketing if we're not going to leverage it. And the stats that are out there from companies like Serious Decisions show us that 60, 70% of the content we create never even gets used. There's no point in that, right? We talked about that earlier today, Latané, where what content am I going to prioritize? Prioritize the content that's going to get built into our campaigns, into our programs. And that's the part that Fuck Content Marketing is about. It's really a book more for demand marketers, but hopefully it gets content marketers and demand marketers to talk.
Hey, I love it. It's okay. We're PG-13 here.
It's all good. My kids are like, Dad can say it. Why can't we say it?
Last, what's the most random Rubbermaid product? that you had to sell?
Oh, that's a good question. Most random. I mean, the weird thing, so this is a long time ago. Like I was working at Rubbermaid in 2002. It's almost 20 years, but I can still tell you the product SKU numbers. Like a 2215 is a tote that's 60 liters, right? And I know it's liters versus, that's because I'm Canadian. But to me, it's those things that trigger you in the moment. Like you see, a Tupperware, or we call them takeaway product on your can. You're like, oh, I know that SKU number. I know what it's sold for at Walmart. It creeps me out sometimes because I have these recurring dreams about all these things.
So now my favorite part of the show is I need to know your colossal fuck up, like the biggest one. Huge.
Oh boy.
You did yesterday.
So many to choose from. I had a business that I was involved in. It was a family investment a number of years ago, and it went completely wrong. I mean, we just got duped by a guy who was a crook. We ended up having to prove civil fraud through this, which I watch too much Law and Order to think that's like a weekly thing, but apparently it's hard to like prove civil fraud, and it doesn't happen often. We succeeded in that, but it was a brutal 3 years, so I look at that in one way and I'm like, that was the worst mistake, the worst thing I got involved in. But on the other side, it was a very expensive education, but it was an education. Right. And I don't think I would have been pushed by my wife to follow more of a passion and get involved in tech the way I did after that. So, you can look at all these things and say like, oh, that was such a screw up to go and do that. It cost me so many years. It took me off course, but it also lets you reset in that moment. And, the reset brought me in to find my co-founder, and within a year or so we were starting Uberflip.
Randy, awesome episode. Always a pleasure to catch up. Can't wait to talk soon.
Thanks so much, Latané. This was a ton of fun. Love talking sense and nonsense.